Good morning. Well, we come back now to Genesis itself. And I come back to chapter 5. Now, chapter 5, very often when people read it, they read through it very quickly because it just seems to be a list of names. The names of people and their sons, or rather their principal son, and then it just tracks the generations down, generation after generation. And I know that on many occasions as I read the Bible, I come to chapter 5 and I say, oh yes, number. It gives a list from Adam to Noah. But then as you began to look at it a bit more closely, you begin to find there's something strange about these names. I want to go through it to you, and this morning I'm going to be looking down a bit because I've got a list here in front of me and I can't remember all the names either. Okay, so I have to look down and just check the names myself. Chapter 5 of Genesis, if you ever care to open it up and look at it, you'll see that there's lists of names. And of course the name starts with Adam. And then it says he had a son called Seth. And that son had another son called Enosh. And then the next generation was Kenan. And then the next generation, Mahalalel. Oh, that must have been a difficult name for somebody to carry. Then we have the name Jared. Then the name Enoch. Enoch, by the way, was the one who was translated, taken out, raptured into the presence of God without dying. Then we get Methuselah. Many people know that name because he was one of the longest living of these patriarchs. Then Lamech, and then Noah. Just a list of names, Each generation, one of the sons was born, and they gave him this name, and this is the name that the race was actually relating to as they saw the patriarchs actually being born, living, and having children themselves. These were the principal people born to each generation. Seems quite normal, quite straightforward, and we read through it quickly. The trouble is, of course, we are given the names in the original Hebrew, not translated into English. So let's look at the names again as if they were translated into English. Well, Adam, that of course means man. Adam. Seth, this was the name meant appointed. They said, God's given us another son because of Cain and Abel, and this son has been appointed to us. This is the son called Seth. His name means appointed. Enosh. Well, it could mean mortal, it could mean miserable. What a strange name to have, Name your son miserable or mortal. But that's the name and that's the translation of it. Kenan, the next generation. Well, it means sorrows. I wonder why the mother called that name to her child when he was born Sorrows. Had she had a different pregnancy, or was there anything else going wrong in her life at that time? But they called the name Kenan. The next generation was called Mahal. I've got to read it out slowly because I can't see it. Mahalalel. Mahalalel. And it means quite simply, the blessed God. The blessed God. This mother probably had an easier time with her pregnancy, and she wants to thank God for the blessing of the child. The next is Jared. And this just means a strange thing. It means he shall come down. She shall come down. Enoch means teaching. Why call him that child Enoch? But that was his name, and he was called Enoch. Methuselah. Well, this was a difficult name. His name meant quite simply, his death shall bring disaster. His death shall bring. I can imagine him going round and people saying, that's a prophetic name on that child. I hope that child lives to be a good old age. Because with his death, terrible things are going to happen. With his death, terrible things are going to happen. Every time he fell down, every time he got injured, say, be careful of Methuselah. It means quite simply, if he dies, then disasters are going to strike the world. They did, actually, because when Methuselah died, the flood came. That's an interesting thing. After Methuselah's death, the flood came. But that, of course, was not his son. His son was called Lamech. Lamech means despairing, despairing. And then Noah means comfort. So he put these names, and you can't imagine for even one moment that these patriarchs got together, and thought, we're going to name these children in a certain way, to send a message throughout time. But if you put the names together into a list, Adam, Seth, Enoch, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, this is what you get. You get a strange sentence. You get man appointed to be miserable mortals and in sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching that his death shall bring the despairing hope. Is that a mistake? Is that a mistake? I don't think it is. Amen.